During Thanksgiving dinner, I sat at the table with a black eye, and my daughter proudly announced, "The old man got what he deserved. My husband taught him a lesson." My son-in-law smiled like a winner, but I silently handed her a black envelope, and her face turned red with shock. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The check trembled in my hands. $8,500. I stood at the kitchen counter, evening light cutting through the window above the sink, and tried to steady my breathing. The pot roast sat in the oven, glazed carrots cooling on the stovetop, their favorite meal. I had spent the afternoon preparing it, setting the table with the good plates, folding napkins the way my late wife used to. I told myself this would fix things between us. The insurance payout had arrived that morning. I knew about the credit card debt, $6,200. Gertrude had mentioned it weeks ago, her voice tight with stress. Marvin's car dealership commissions had been slow. I decided right then I would help them. What else was the money for? I heard Marvin's truck in the driveway. My pulse quickened. I rehearsed the words in my head one more time as his key scraped in the lock. "Hey!" I called out, forcing brightness into my voice. "Good day at work?" Marvin dropped his jacket on the chair. He barely glanced at me. "Long? Dinner's almost ready. I made that pot roast you like," he grunted, heading toward the refrigerator. Gertrude emerged from the hallway, her arms crossed. She looked at the set table, then at me. Something flickered across her face. I pulled the check from my pocket. My hands were still shaking. "I know things have been tight for you two. I got the insurance payout today, and I want to help with the credit card." Marvin stopped mid-reach for a beer. He turned slowly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marvin crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and snatched the check from my hand. His fingers closed around it like a trap snapping shut. "Finally did something useful, old man." He studied the amount, his lips pulling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Hand over your PIN, too. We need the rest for current expenses." The words hit me wrong. The check is for the debt. That's already more than... I decide what's enough in this house now. His voice had gone flat, dangerous. I felt my chest tighten. "Marvin, I'm trying to help here. But my savings are..." He stepped closer. I could smell the cigarette smoke on his shirt. "Your savings? You live under this roof because we let you. Because Gertrude felt sorry for you after your little accident. This is my house." My voice came out quieter than I intended. "My name is on the deed." His hand shot out. The shove caught me square in the chest. I stumbled backward, my heel catching on the chair leg. The world tilted. I threw my arm out, trying to catch myself, but gravity was faster. The corner of the kitchen chair met my face with a crack that echoed inside my skull. Pain exploded above my eye. I hit the floor hard, my shoulder taking the impact, and then there was warmth running down my temple. Copper taste in my mouth. The ceiling light swam. "Marvin!" Gertrude's voice cut through the ringing in my ears. I looked up at her, blinking blood out of my left eye. She would help. She had to. I was her father. She stood in the doorway, her face pale. But she wasn't moving toward me. She was looking at Marvin, then back at me, calculating something. "Dad, you brought this on yourself." Her voice was ice. "Why do you provoke Marvin? Just give him what he wants." The blood dripped steadily now, warm against my cheek. I pressed my palm to my eyebrow, and it came away red. My shoulder throbbed where I'd landed. The kitchen floor was cold beneath me. "Gertrude," I started, but she was already turning away. "Come on," she said to Marvin. "Let him cool off." Marvin folded the check and slid it into his pocket. He looked down at me one more time, and there was nothing in his eyes. No remorse, no concern, just satisfaction. They left the room together. Their footsteps receded down the hall. A door closed. I lay there for a moment, stunned. The pot roast smell had turned cloying. The carefully set table mocked me from my position on the floor. Blood pooled in the hollow of my collarbone, soaking into my shirt collar. Slowly, I pushed myself up. My hands shook. Everything shook. I stumbled to the bathroom, flicked on the light, and stared at my reflection. The cut above my eyebrow was deep, still bleeding freely. My eye was already starting to swell. Blood had run down the side of my face, into my gray hair, staining my collar. At 64 years old, I looked ancient, broken. I sat down hard on the edge of the bathtub. The check was gone. My dignity was gone. The dinner I had made with love would grow cold and be thrown away. I pressed a towel to the wound, but it did nothing for the deeper cut, the one that had nothing to do with my face. 35 years as a firefighter, 23 lives saved, 3 commendations for bravery, and I couldn't protect myself in my own home. I couldn't protect myself from my own daughter. The towel in my hand trembled. Blood seeped through the white cotton, blooming like some terrible flower. Through the bathroom door, I heard the television turn on in the living room. Canned laughter, the sound of their evening continuing as if nothing had happened, as if I didn't exist at all. 2 weeks had crawled by. I sat at the head of the dining room table, the bruise under my eye now a palette of purple and yellow, impossible to hide. Gertrude had decorated the room with autumn leaves and pillar candles. The effect was almost convincing, almost festive, if you ignored the tension thick enough to choke on. The past 14 days had been silent ones. Gertrude and Marvin moved through the house like I was furniture. They spoke around me, never to me. I ate my meals alone, cleaned up after myself, stayed in my room or the garage. The Bruise had been my constant companion, shifting through shades of violet and green before settling into this sickly yellow-purple that screamed what had happened here. Now we had guests, Marvin's friends, Steve and Carla, a couple in their 30s, both dressed too casually for Thanksgiving in jeans and sweaters. They sat across from me, looking everywhere except at my face. "The turkey looks amazing," Carla said, her voice bright and strained. Marvin carved the bird, standing at my usual position at the table's head. He had moved me down one seat. I watched his hands work, the knife sliding through meat, and said nothing. Gertrude passed dishes with practiced smiles. "We're so happy you could join us. It means so much to have friends around the table." I lifted my water glass. My hand was steady now. 2 weeks had given me time to bury the shaking deep inside where no one could see it. Steve reached for the mashed potatoes, and his gaze caught on my face. He tried to look away quickly, but I saw the moment of recognition, the question forming. "What happened to your eye, Wilbert?" He asked it carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. "Looks like it was quite a hit." The table went quiet. Forks stopped moving. Gertrude set down the gravy boat with deliberate precision. She smiled at Steve. "Oh, Dad got into a little situation. My husband had to teach him a lesson. He thought he could still make all the rules in this house." My fingers tightened around my fork. The metal pressed into my palm. Marvin added, his voice casual as if discussing the weather. "Old man needed to understand how things work now." Steve and Carla exchanged a glance, the kind of glance that said they wished they hadn't asked, wished they weren't here. Their silence filled the room like smoke. I said nothing. My jaw ached from how hard I was clenching it. The bruise throbbed in time with my pulse. Gertrude's words had pulled me back 3 years, whether I wanted to go or not. I had been at the warehouse fire on Grant Road. The family was trapped on the 2nd floor, smoke pouring from every window. I had gone up the ladder, found them huddled in a back office. Mother, father, 2 kids. Got them out, one by one. The building had groaned, timber cracking. I had made it to the ladder when the floor gave way beneath my left foot. Fell 12 feet onto rebar and concrete. The impact had shattered 2 vertebrae. The hospital, surgery, physical therapy that felt like torture. The doctor's words, early retirement, disability payments, limited mobility for the rest of my life. Gertrude had visited me in recovery. "We'll move in, Dad. Help you recover. You shouldn't be alone." Those first 6 months, she had been the daughter I remembered. She cooked. She drove me to appointments. She helped me navigate the paperwork for disability and insurance. Marvin had been polite, helpful even, fixing things around the house. Then small changes. "Dad, we need to use your credit card for groceries, just until Marvin's commission comes through." Then, "Dad, we're having friends over. Maybe you could stay in your room." Then, "Dad, we're making some changes to the house. You don't mind, right?" I had thought giving them space and time would help. That patience was love. I had been such a fool. "Dad?" Gertrude's voice was sharp. It snapped me back to the present, to the Thanksgiving table, to Steve and Carla's uncomfortable faces. "Pass the gravy." I handed it to her without a word. The meal dragged on. Marvin dominated the conversation, telling stories about the dealership, about his sales numbers, acting as host, in my house, at my table. Steve and Carla laughed when they were supposed to, but their smiles never reached their eyes. Dad, try to look more festive. Gertrude's words were sugar-coated steel. You're ruining the holiday with that face. I'm fine, I said quietly. Just tired. Carla jumped in, desperate to change the subject. The turkey is wonderful, Gertrude. What's your secret? Oh, it's all about the brine. Gertrude launched into an explanation, and I let the words wash over me. Marvin caught my eye across the table. He raised his wineglass slightly, a private toast, a reminder of who had won. Steve and Carla left before dessert was even served. They made excuses about an early morning, about another commitment. Their relief at escaping was palpable. Carla hugged Gertrude at the door. Steve shook Marvin's hand. Neither of them looked at me. When the door closed behind them, I stood. I'll be in the garage. Of course you will, Gertrude said to my back. The garage was cold. November in Arizona meant evening temperatures that could drop 40 degrees from the afternoon high. I didn't turn on the space heater. The cold felt appropriate. This was the only space that was still mine. My tools hung on pegboards, organized by size and function. My workbench held projects in various states of completion. A wooden box sat on the shelf, and I pulled it down, opened it. Photographs. Me in my firefighter's uniform, 20 years younger. The whole crew at the station house, arms around each other's shoulders. Award ceremonies, handshakes with the mayor. A newspaper clipping, yellowed at the edges. Local firefighter saves family of 4. My service certificate hung on the wall. 35 years. 3 commendations for bravery. The numbers I had counted in my head. 23 lives saved over the course of my career. 23 people who went home to their families because I ran toward danger instead of away from it. I sat on the workbench. The photographs spread before me. I had saved strangers. I had carried children from burning buildings. I had pulled people from car wrecks and collapsed structures. And now I couldn't save myself from my own daughter and her husband. My shoulders shook, but not from cold. Not from tears either. From something else. Something that had been building for 2 weeks while I sat in my room, silent, invisible, while they lived in my house and spent my money and treated me like I was nothing. Something has to change. The thought was crystal clear. I can't live like this. The garage window reflected my image back at me. Dark glass, darker sky beyond. The bruise was still visible in the dim light, but it was my eyes that caught my attention. They looked different, harder, like something had shifted behind them while I wasn't paying attention. I looked at the man in the glass for a long moment. Then I gathered the photographs and put them back in the box, carefully, deliberately, like preparing for something. The house lights were still on when I looked toward the kitchen windows. I could see Gertrude moving inside, cleaning up, living her life in my home. Not for much longer, I thought. Something in my chest had solidified, turned from hurt into something else, something colder and infinitely more patient. I turned off the garage light and stood there in the darkness, looking at my house like I was seeing it for the first time, or maybe for the last time as the man I used to be. Early December brought cold mornings and a new vigilance. I sat in my living room chair with the newspaper spread before me, but my eyes tracked Gertrude instead of headlines. She moved through the kitchen with her phone pressed to her ear, voice dropping when she noticed me watching. Something had changed in me since that night in the garage. I was no longer the man who waited passively for the next blow. The bruise had faded weeks ago, but I found myself touching the spot sometimes. A reminder, a catalyst. For days I'd been noticing things I'd missed before. Mail disappeared from the box before I could check it. Letters from law firms that I glimpsed in Gertrude's hands but never saw again. When the phone rang, she screened calls. When I entered a room, conversations stopped mid-sentence. They thought I was oblivious. Broken. They were wrong. That afternoon, I moved down the hallway toward the bathroom. Marvin's voice drifted from the spare bedroom he'd converted into an office. He was on the phone, door half open. His tone was casual, conspiratorial. I froze. My firefighter training kicked in, assess before acting. I pressed against the wall, controlling my breathing, listening. Yeah, We're moving forward with the incompetency filing. Marvin's words came clear and sharp. Old man has no idea. Guardianship is the cleanest way. Once it's done, we control everything, including the house. Cold understanding washed through me. My heart hammered against my ribs. The lawyer says it takes about 6 months if we document properly, Marvin continued. House is worth at least $380. My wife deserves that security after putting up with him. The door handle turned. I moved quickly, entering the bathroom, flushing the toilet, establishing my presence elsewhere. When I emerged, Marvin was in the hallway, phone pocketed, looking satisfied. Taking a lot of bathroom breaks these days, old man. He brushed past me, shoulder checking mine. I returned to the living room, sat in my chair, stared at nothing. Guardianship, the word echoed in my skull. They weren't just stealing my money. They were planning to strip my legal rights, declare me incompetent, make me a ward of the state, their ward. That night I lay in bed, listening to the house settle. Around 2 a.m, Marvin's snoring reached my room through the thin walls. Gertrude's breathing had gone steady hours before. I got up, moved through the darkness with the silence of practice. The spare bedroom door was closed but not locked. Their arrogance? They never thought I'd dare. I used my phone's flashlight, keeping the beam narrow and low. The desk was cluttered with papers and folders. One caught my eye. Financial planning, written in Gertrude's neat script. Inside, the documents told a story of calculated betrayal, draft petition for guardianship, respondent unable to manage financial affairs due to cognitive decline, handwritten notes in the margins. Dr. Morrison will testify to decline? A name I didn't recognize. A doctor they planned to use as a false witness. Property appraisal, house valued at $385,000. Contact information. Attorney Marcus Webb specializes in complex guardianship cases. Timeline scrawled on a yellow sticky note. File petition by February, hearing by May, control by summer. My hands shook as I photographed each page with my old flip phone. The camera was crude, but the flash was silent. I took multiple shots of each document, making sure every word was readable. The phone's storage filled with evidence of their conspiracy. I replaced everything exactly as I'd found it. Angles mattered. Position mattered. They couldn't know I'd been here. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed. Sleep was impossible. The scope of their plan pressed down on me like smoke in a burning room. By summer, they wanted me declared incompetent, unable to vote, unable to manage money, unable to make medical decisions, a legal non-person in my own life. Morning came eventually. I made coffee, acted normal. Gertrude appeared around 8, already dressed. Going out? She asked without looking up from her phone. Doctor's orders. Need to keep moving. Back pain acts up if I sit too long. She waved dismissively. Fine. Just be back for dinner. We're having guests. I drove to the main branch of Tucson Public Library. The choice was deliberate. Public computers meant no digital trail at home, no history for them to stumble across. I found a terminal in a quiet corner, away from the main traffic. My searches were methodical. Arizona elder abuse laws. Guardianship Arizona. Property rights, elderly. What I found made my blood run cold. Arizona Adult Protective Services had strong protections for vulnerable adults, but guardianship could strip every right I had. Once a judge granted it, reversal was nearly impossible. I'd be trapped in a legal cage, watching strangers make every decision about my life. I researched eviction procedures, property ownership rights, changing wills. The law offered protection, but only if I acted first. If they filed the petition before I secured my position, I'd spend the rest of my fight on defense, already labeled as impaired. The window of opportunity was narrow. They'd said February for filing. That gave me weeks, maybe 2 months. I searched for elder law attorneys in Tucson, wrote down names and phone numbers on paper. Old school. Nothing digital they could trace. 3 hours passed before I checked the clock. I gathered my notes, logged off the computer, walked back to my car. I sat in the parking lot for a long moment, engine off, staring at the library's brick facade. Then I looked at my house keys in my hand. Keys to a house I'd paid for with 35 years of running into fires while others ran out. A house they planned to steal from me through legal manipulation. The old Wilbert would have been paralyzed, hurt, disbelieving that his daughter could do this. The new Wilbert felt something different. Cold clarity. I had spent my career assessing danger, making plans, executing them under pressure. This was the same skill set, different kind of fire, but fire nonetheless. I started the car and drove home. When I pulled into the driveway, I looked at the house, my house, with new eyes. They were inside, planning their campaign, making their calls, consulting their lawyer. They thought they were playing a game I didn't understand. They were wrong. I got out of the car, stood for a moment in the driveway. The winter sun felt warm on my face. I walked to the front door, key ready. Gertrude met me in the hallway. "Where have you been all day? You were gone for hours." "Just getting some exercise." I kept my voice mild. "Fresh air clears the head. I feel better than I have in weeks." She studied me for a moment, suspicious but finding nothing. "Whatever. Dinner's at 6. I went to my room, closed the door, sat on the bed with my phone scrolling through the photos of their documents. Evidence, timeline, names. They'd taught me something important. Strike first or lose everything. I looked at the attorney names I'd written down. Tomorrow, I'd start making calls. Tonight, I'd let them think they were winning. By early January, I'd established a routine. Every morning after breakfast, I announced my health walk and left the house. Gertrude barely looked up anymore. Good. I wanted to be predictable, ignorable, harmless. The past few weeks, I'd been documenting everything. Every charge to my credit card I hadn't authorized. Every dismissive comment. Every boundary violation. Building my case one piece at a time, careful and methodical. Today's walk took me down Speedway Boulevard. The morning was cold for Tucson, mid-40s, but the sun was climbing, promising warmth. I passed shops just opening, cafes setting out sidewalk signs. Activity. Life continuing for people who weren't trapped in their own homes. A coffee shop caught my attention. Morning brew, in hand-painted letters above the door. Warm light spilled from the windows. I could see people inside, a woman behind the counter, laughing at something a customer said. I hesitated on the sidewalk. Should I interact with people? Risk exposure? What if they asked questions I couldn't answer without revealing my situation? But I needed this. Needed normalcy. Needed to remember what it felt like to exist in the world as a person, not a target. I pushed open the door. The smell hit me first. Fresh pastries and roasted coffee beans. Mismatched chairs clustered around small tables. Local art covered the walls, colorful and unpolished. Real. A young woman typed on a laptop in the corner. An older couple shared a croissant by the window. The woman behind the counter smiled at me. 60-something, silver hair pulled back, confident in her movements. "What can I get you?" "Coffee, just black." Bold choice, coming right up. I paid, took my cup to a seat by the window, warmed my hands on the ceramic, stared at the street outside without really seeing it. My mind was on February, on petition filings, on Dr. Morrison's name on that document. Footsteps approached. The woman from the counter stood beside my table with a coffee pot. "Refill? You look like you could use it." I glanced at my still full cup, then at her face. She wasn't mocking me. Her expression was kind but direct. "I've owned this place 12 years, she continued. "You learn to read people? You've got that look." "What look?" My voice came out guarded. "The one that says you're carrying something heavy." She gestured to the chair across from me. "None of my business, of course. But this is a good place to set things down for a minute." I should have deflected, should have smiled and thanked her and sent her away. Instead, I heard myself say, "Family troubles." She nodded, didn't push, didn't pry, started to walk away. Then she turned back. "I had family troubles once, too. Nearly lost everything because of it. I'll tell you what I learned if you want to hear it." Something in her tone, not intrusive, just present, made me gesture to the chair. She sat. 5 years ago, my son decided I was too old to run this place. Her voice was matter of fact, but pain flickered beneath. Said I was declining, making poor decisions. He tried to get guardianship, take over my business. I set down my cup carefully. Guardianship? Had debts. Gambling. Figured Mom's coffee shop could be his ATM. She looked around at her business, evidence of survival. Legal battle took 2 years. Cost me $40,000. I won, but barely. What happened to your son? Haven't spoken to him since. Worst part wasn't the money. It was realizing my own child saw me as a resource, not a person. The words struck bone deep. I sat very still. My biggest mistake? Rosalind leaned forward. I waited. Let him make the first move, file papers. Put me on defense from the start. If I'd acted first, secured my assets, documented his abuse, gotten legal help immediately, would have been much simpler. She looked at me directly. I'm guessing your family troubles are similar. The moment stretched. I made a decision. My daughter, her husband, they're living in my house. I overheard them planning to file for guardianship. February. Do they know you heard? No. Good. She stood, disappeared behind the counter, returned with a business card, worn from handling, edges soft. Robert Shepard, elder law attorney. He saved me. I took the card like it was made of something precious, fragile. He knows Arizona's elder protection laws inside out. More importantly, he believes seniors have the right to fight back. She paused. He's not cheap, but he's worth it, and he does payment plans. I have some savings left. If they haven't found all of it yet, I thought, but didn't say. Document everything, Rosalind said firmly. Every time they take your money without asking, write it down. Date, amount, what they said. Bank statements, credit card bills. Get copies of everything. You'll need evidence. I pulled out the small notebook I'd started carrying, wrote down her words. And Wilbert? She'd learned my name somewhere in our conversation. Don't let them know you're preparing. Element of surprise is your biggest advantage. Thank you. The words felt inadequate. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Her smile was sad but warm. Because I know what it's like to feel alone in your own life, and because I wished someone had helped me sooner. I stayed another hour. We talked about things that had nothing to do with legal battles. Her years building the business, Tucson's changes, small observations about life. First real conversation I'd had in months. She treated me like a person who had thoughts worth hearing. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. Come back any time. Coffee's on the house for fellow survivors. I haven't survived yet. You will? You've already started. That's the hardest part. I walked back toward my house, card secure in my pocket. My mind worked through steps. Call the attorney, gather more documents, prepare to move first instead of reacting. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt something besides dread, possibility. I wasn't alone anymore, had an ally, resources, a friend who understood. The war wasn't over, but I was no longer unarmed. My house appeared ahead, Marvin's truck in the driveway. I touched the card in my pocket, took a deep breath, pushed open the front door. Gertrude looked up from her phone. Long walk. Felt good to stretch my legs. I headed toward my room, past her, past Marvin on the couch. Think I'll keep it up. In my room, I closed the door, pulled out the card, read the name again. Robert Shepard, elder law attorney. Let them think they're winning, I thought. Let them believe I'm just going through motions, taking aimless walks, fading into irrelevance. I'm just getting started. Early February brought decisions that couldn't be postponed. I sat in my car outside a modest professional building on East Broadway. Engine off, a manila folder thick with evidence on the passenger seat. The building's facade was unremarkable. Beige stucco, small parking lot, second-floor offices with names stenciled on windows. I'd called ahead 3 days ago, made the appointment under the name William Grant. Cautious, careful. Today marked the line I'd crossed from gathering information to taking action. I checked the folder one more time. Photos of the guardianship documents I'd found in Marvin's office. Bank statements showing $3,400 in unauthorized charges to online poker sites. The medical record from my November emergency room visit, documenting the injury above my eye. Everything organized, labeled, dated. 35 years I'd run into burning buildings. Never felt fear quite like this. But I felt something else too. Clarity. Purpose. The same focus that came over me when the alarm sounded and everyone else was running away. I picked up the folder and got out of the car. Each step across the parking lot felt momentous. I entered the building, passed the elevator, took the stairs instead. Needed the time to compose myself, center my thoughts. Second floor. Door on the right. Robert Shepard, attorney at law. elder law, and estate planning. I pushed it open. The receptionist, a woman in her 30s with efficient movements, looked up. "Mr. Grant? Mr. Shepard's expecting you." She led me down a short hallway to an office. Robert Shepard stood as I entered. Late 40s, maybe early 50s, gray threading through dark hair, professional suit, but approachable face. His desk was organized, but not sterile. Photos of what looked like grown children, a coffee mug with "World's Okayest Lawyer" printed on it. We shook hands. His grip was firm. "Rosalind called ahead," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "She speaks highly of you. Please sit." I sat, placed the folder on the desk between us. "I'm not sure where to start," I admitted. The vulnerability in my voice surprised me. "Start with what brought you here." So I did. My daughter, her husband, living in my house rent-free. The overheard phone conversation about guardianship, the documents I'd found in the middle of the night. I opened the folder, laid out the photos of their petition draft, the timeline they'd scrawled on sticky notes, the attorney's contact information. Shepard examined each one carefully, his expression shifting from professional interest to concern. Then the bank statements, charges I'd never authorized, money disappearing while I paid for everything else. Finally, the medical record, the injury from Marvin's shove, the documentation of violence. Shepard took notes on a yellow legal pad, asked clarifying questions. His voice stayed level, but his pen pressed harder into the paper as the story unfolded. "When do they plan to file?" he asked. They mentioned February. He looked at the calendar on his desk. "Then we're just in time." He set down his pen. "You've done excellent groundwork, Mr. Gray. Most people come to me after the petition's been filed. You're ahead of the curve." That should have felt like a victory. It didn't. It felt like confirmation that the nightmare was real. Shepard leaned back in his chair. "I'm going to recommend a 3-part strategy. First, we change your will immediately." I hadn't expected that. My will? Right now, I assume your daughter is the primary beneficiary. She's the only one. Then if something happens to you before we secure your position, she gets everything. That gives her motive to wait, or worse. He let that sink in. We create a new will. Leave her the mandatory minimum under Arizona law, about $50,000. The rest goes to a charity of your choice. The thought turned my stomach. A charity. Or anyone else you choose. The point is removing her financial incentive. I thought about it. The Tucson Firefighters Relief Fund. I wanted to help people who actually save lives. Shepard made a note. Good choice. Second part. Power of attorney for healthcare and finances. You need someone you trust to make decisions if you're genuinely unable. Otherwise, the court appoints a guardian, likely your daughter. I have someone. Rosalind Turner. He nodded approvingly. Excellent. Someone without financial interest in your death. That's crucial. He paused. Third part is the hardest. We prepare eviction paperwork. The word hit like cold water. Eviction? She's my daughter? Shepard's face softened, but his voice stayed firm. They already made their choice when they decided to take everything from you. The only question is whether you'll make yours. I sat with that, the weight of it, the finality. How long would eviction take? My voice was quieter than I intended. Arizona law requires 30 days' notice for occupants without a lease. If they refuse to leave, court enforcement adds another 30 to 60 days. Can I wait on that decision? Yes, but the paperwork should be ready. When you need it, you'll need it fast. I looked at him, at this stranger who was offering to help me evict my own child from the house I'd raised her in. Do it, all of it. Prepare the eviction papers too. You're sure? I'm sure. I need to protect myself. Should have done it months ago. The paperwork began. Retainer agreement, initial documents, costs discussed. $5,000 for the retainer, $1,500 for will preparation, $800 for POA documents. Total $7,300 to start. Court costs, if it escalated, could run another $15,000 to $25,000. I could afford it, barely, but I could. I signed with a steady hand. Firefighter's hands, trained not to shake in crisis. Shepard stood when we finished, extended his hand again. You're doing the right thing. Protecting yourself isn't betrayal. I nodded, but the words didn't ease the weight in my chest. I left his office and drove home, my mind processing everything. Legal strategy, costs, timeline. the machinery of protection grinding into motion. When I pulled into my driveway around 2 in the afternoon, Marvin's car was there, home unusually early. I entered through the front door, cautious. Marvin was in the living room, pacing. His energy was agitated, aggressive. When he saw me, his face twisted. "Where the hell have you been?" I kept my voice calm. "Doctor's appointment. Why?" "Your pension check. It's 2 days late." 2 days. How am I supposed to plan anything when you can't even get your money on time? The absurdity of it struck me like a physical blow. My pension check. My money. "We have bills, old man. Your delays cost us." Gertrude appeared from the kitchen, joining the attack. "Dad, you need to call them tomorrow. This is unacceptable." I looked at them both, my daughter and her husband standing in my living room, berating me because my pension check that funded their life was 2 days late. Something crystallized. The last fragment of doubt evaporated. "I'll handle it," I said calmly, giving nothing away. I walked to my room, closed the door, sat on the bed and pulled out Shepard's business card, turning it over in my hands. This was necessary. They'd shown me who they were, over and over. Now it was time to show them who I still was. I picked up my phone and dialed Rosalind's number. She answered on the second ring. "Wilbert, how did it go?" "I met with the attorney," I said. "I need to ask you something important." 1 week later, I sat across from Rosalind in Notary Janice Morales' office, a conference table between us covered with documents that would change everything. When I'd called Rosalind that day after meeting Shepard, she'd agreed immediately. "Of course I'll do it," she'd said. "That's what friends are for." Now we were making it official. Janice Morales was a woman in her mid-40s, efficient and precise. She arranged the documents in order, explaining each one with the formal care that law required. "This new will designates the Tucson Firefighters Relief Fund as primary beneficiary," she said, tapping the first stack of papers. "Your daughter receives the mandatory minimum under Arizona law, $50,000 cash. This structure prevents successful challenge based on complete disinheritance." I stared at the words. My house, the one I'd paid for with decades of risking my life, would go to help other firefighters. Gertrude would get $50,000. Not nothing, but not what she'd planned on. The power of attorney documents authorize Ms. Turner to make healthcare and financial decisions only if you're genuinely unable to do so yourself, Janice continued. This prevents court-appointed guardianship. Rosalind sat beside me, her presence steady. She'd dressed professionally for this, a simple navy dress, her silver hair pulled back. She looked at me and I saw understanding in her face. She knew what this cost. "Are you ready?" Janice asked. I picked up the pen, signed my name on the will, then the healthcare POA, then the financial POA. My hand stayed steady through each signature. Rosalind signed her acceptance of the POA duties. Her signature was smaller than mine, careful. Janice notarized each document, applying her seal with practiced precision. The sound of the stamp, that decisive thunk, felt final, irrevocable. The process took 45 minutes. When we finished, Janice gathered the signed originals. "These are now legally binding. Copies will be filed with your attorney and county records." She handed me a large black envelope, thick with papers. "Your copies. Keep them secure." The black envelope sat heavy in my hands. We left the office together. Outside, Rosalind touched my arm. "Coffee? We should talk." We drove separately to Morning Brew. Inside her cafe, she made us both coffee and we sat at a corner table, away from the handful of other customers. I held the black envelope, unable to set it down. "How do you feel?" Rosalind asked gently. "Like I just cut my daughter out of my life." "You protected yourself. There's a difference." "Is there?" I looked at her. "She'll never forgive this." "She made her choice when she let him hurt you. You're making yours now." I stared at my coffee, the steam rising, the warmth I couldn't quite feel. "When will you tell her?" Rosalind asked. "Not yet. Shepard says if she knows now, she'll challenge the will. Claim I was incompetent when I signed it, that I was coerced or confused. So when? When I'm ready. When the time is right." Rosalind reached across the table and touched my hand, just for a moment. "You're not alone in this." I nodded, couldn't speak. Late afternoon, I drove home. The black envelope went directly to the garage. into my locked toolbox buried beneath old equipment. Secured, hidden. I entered the house through the back door. The atmosphere hit me immediately, tension thick enough to choke on. Marvin was in the kitchen, his energy coiled and dangerous. Gertrude hovered nearby, anxious in a way I hadn't seen before. Marvin saw me. "We need to talk, now." I set my keys on the counter. "About what?" "About this house, about security, about my family's future." "Not our family. My family." The possessive language was deliberate. Gertrude stepped forward. "Dad, we've been thinking." "Marvin's right. We need legal protection." Marvin pulled papers from his back pocket. Pre-printed forms, clearly prepared in advance. "I want you to sign these. Joint ownership. This house becomes ours together. Simple." He laid them on the kitchen table. Deed transfer forms. Joint tenancy agreements. They'd planned this ambush. I looked at the papers without touching them. These are legal documents. I'd need to have them reviewed by an attorney. "Don't need a lawyer for family business," Marvin said flatly. "Any document affecting property ownership needs legal review." His face darkened. "You don't trust us?" "This isn't about trust. It's about being careful." Gertrude tried a different approach. "Dad, after everything we've done for you, what have you done?" I kept my voice level. "Specifically," she faltered, "we live here, help you, take care of things. You live rent-free in my house. I pay all bills. What exactly are you taking care of?" Marvin stepped closer, invading my space, trying to intimidate. "Old man, you're making a mistake." "Maybe," I held my ground, "but it's my mistake to make. My house. My name on the deed. For now." The threat hung in the air between us. I picked up the papers. "I'm not signing anything today. I don't feel well. Can't make important decisions when I'm not at my best." Using their own strategy against them, the claim of impairment. Marvin's face flushed red. "You're playing games?" "I'm being careful. Doctor's orders. Don't stress myself." Gertrude tried again. "Dad, this is important." "Then it can wait until I'm feeling better. A few days won't matter." I took the papers with me, left the kitchen before they could argue further, walked to my bedroom and locked the door. A small act of boundary. I pressed my ear against the door. Their voices carried from the kitchen. "He's stalling," Marvin said. "He knows something." "He can't know. We've been careful." "Then why won't he sign? We're running out of time." "Your debts aren't my father's problem." "They are if we lose the house." Something crashed. Glass breaking. Marvin's rage unleashed. I pulled away from the door, sat on my bed, pulled out my notebook and wrote everything down. Date, time, what they'd demanded, what they'd threatened. Evidence. Then I photographed the deed transfer papers with my phone. Every page, every line of text, proof of their attempted coercion. I sent the photos to Shepard's email from my phone, then texted him. "They tried to force deed transfer today. Documents attached. What next?" His response came within minutes. "Don't sign anything. Continue documenting. We may need eviction papers sooner than planned." I sat there holding my phone. The black envelope was in the garage, locked away. The will was signed. The POA was executed. Evidence was mounting. Time was my weapon now. Every day they pushed, they created more proof of their intentions. Every demand, every threat, every act of intimidation went into my notebook and onto my phone. I looked at the deed transfer papers in my lap, thought about Marvin's words. For now. "You're right," I thought. "Time is running out. Just not for me." April arrived with a coldness that had nothing to do with the weather. The house felt different now. Hostile territory where I moved carefully, watching my back. Gertrude and Marvin had noticed the change in me, the refusals, the boundaries, the quiet resistance. They didn't like it, and I could feel them watching, calculating, preparing their response. It started with small things I almost missed. Gertrude on her phone constantly, conversations stopping the moment I entered a room. Then I noticed her taking photographs, my unmade bed, dishes left in the sink, random clutter on the living room floor. But something was off. One afternoon I watched from the hallway as she moved items from my bedroom, clothes, papers, personal effects, and scattered them across the living room. Then she stepped back, pulled out her phone and photographed the staged disorder. She turned the angle, snapped several more shots. She was manufacturing evidence. Over the next week, the pattern became clear. She'd ask me questions while recording on her phone, leading questions designed to make me sound confused. Dad, what year is it? Dad, who's the president? I gave vague non-answers, refusing to play her game. She'd document my silence as confusion. They weren't just stealing my money anymore. They were trying to steal my credibility. I started my own documentation, took photos of rooms before she could stage them, noted timestamps, built a parallel record. Then came the phone call that changed everything. I was in my room when my cell rang. The bank manager from First National. Mr. Gray, we need to verify. Did you attempt to add someone to your account today? My pulse quickened. No, I'm at home. What happened? A man came in with signature authorization, claimed to be adding a joint account holder, but the signature looked questionable, and you weren't present. Arizona law required both parties present for joint account designation, notarized. The attempt had failed, but it had happened. Who tried to do this? A Mr. Marvin said he was your son-in-law, that you'd asked him to handle it. Ice water through my veins, forgery, financial fraud, federal crime. I thanked her, hung up, immediately documented the call, then dialed Shepard. They just tried to forge my signature at the bank. A pause. That's a felony. Did the bank file a report? They declined. Family matter, they said, but they documented it. Get a copy of that documentation. This strengthens our position considerably. I realized something as I hung up. They were getting desperate, making mistakes, leaving traces. The following week, Mrs. Patterson stopped me on my morning walk. She lived 2 houses down, had known me 15 years. Her expression was awkward, concerned. Wilbert, how are you feeling? I'm fine, Helen. Why? Well, Marvin mentioned you've been having some difficulties. Memory issues. He said you might need help soon. The words landed like a punch. Marvin said that? He's worried about you. Said you forget things, get confused. He's just concerned. Her voice had that careful tone people use with the fragile, the impaired. Over the next few days, I noticed other neighbors acting differently. Some avoided eye contact. Others showed exaggerated concern. Mr. Davis, from across the street. Let me know if you need anything, buddy. Getting older is tough. They were poisoning my reputation, building a public narrative to support their guardianship filing. I called Rosalind from my car, parked down the street where they couldn't see. They're telling the neighborhood I'm incompetent. What do I do? We met at Morning Brew an hour later. She listened to everything, her face hardening. You need to publicly demonstrate competence, she said finally. Social proof. Who knows you best? Who can vouch for your capability? I thought about it. My old crew, the firefighters. Call them. Host something at your house. Let them see the situation firsthand. Brilliant. Witnesses who could testify to my mental state. People with credibility and authority. That afternoon, I made the calls. Frank Coleman answered on the 3rd ring. My former captain, retired now but still sharp as ever. Wilbert, haven't heard from you in months. How are you? I told him everything. The truth, unvarnished. Frank's response was immediate. That son of a... We'll be there. Saturday. And I'm bringing Jimmy and Tom. Saturday morning, I was nervous but prepared. Frank arrived with 2 other former firefighters, Jimmy Chen and Tom Rodriguez. All 3 were in their 60s and 70s, fit and sharp, men who commanded respect without demanding it. Gertrude and Marvin were caught completely off guard. We sat in the living room. The conversation flowed naturally. Old fires, rescues, department gossip. I told detailed stories, remembered names and dates, displayed perfect recall of events from decades past. Frank asked pointed questions. Wilbert, you keeping track of your finances? Pension treating you right? Managing fine. All accounts current. Bills paid. Investments monitored. Frank exchanged glances with Jimmy and Tom. Message received. Marvin tried to interject. Actually, Dad forgets things sometimes. Frank cut him off without looking at him. Wilbert's sharper than men, half his age. Always has been. After 2 hours, they prepared to leave. Frank pulled me aside in the hallway, spoke quietly. I see what's happening here. That son-in-law is a piece of work. It's complicated, Frank. No, it's not. He's using you. Your daughter's letting him. He looked me directly in the eye. You going to do something about this? I'm working on it. Legal process. Good. He handed me his card. You need witnesses, character references, testimony, anything you call me. I mean it. We take care of our own. After they left, I felt different, stronger. I had allies now, credible witnesses, a support system. Gertrude was furious. What was that about? Showing off for your friends? Just catching up with old colleagues. Marvin stepped closer. Trying to make us look bad? Not everything is about you. I returned to my room. Texted Shepard. Have 3 witnesses willing to testify to competence if needed. Former fire captain and 2 firefighters. His response came quickly. Perfect. Their testimony will counter any incompetence claims. Well done. I sat on my bed, looking at Frank's card. The tide was turning. They'd attacked, but I'd reinforced my position. They wanted to isolate me. Instead, I was building an army. June brought heat that pressed down like a physical weight, but it was nothing compared to the pressure inside the house. The weeks since the firefighter gathering had been a slow burn nightmare. Marvin and Gertrude had grown more aggressive, more desperate, sensing that time wasn't on their side. The house had become a pressure cooker, and I could feel it was about to explode. Every morning started with confrontation. Marvin in the kitchen blocking my path to the coffee maker. You need to reconsider your position on this house, old man. There will be consequences. Physical intimidation, standing too close, invading my space, making me step around him. Every evening brought Gertrude's emotional manipulation. Dad, do you want your only daughter living on the street? What kind of father does this? Guilt trips, victim narratives, tears on demand. No neutral interactions existed anymore. Every conversation was manipulation or threat. The house had divided into territories. My room was a refuge. Everywhere else was hostile ground. The daily pressure accumulated, unbearable. Then came the line I couldn't allow them to cross. Mid-June, a Wednesday afternoon. I was in the garage organizing tools when I heard noise from inside the house. Something crashing, movement where there shouldn't be any. I entered through the kitchen, walked down the hallway. My bedroom door stood open. It should have been closed. Marvin was inside, rifling through my dresser drawers, clothes scattered on the floor, papers pulled from boxes. My personal space violated completely. What are you doing? He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Looking for what you're hiding? This is my room. Get out. It's my house soon. I'll go where I want. He stepped toward me, inches from my face. Where are the documents? The will? The bank stuff. I know you're hiding something. I stood my ground. Get out. He left, finally. But the damage was done. Complete violation. No privacy. No safety left in my own home. This was the line. I called Shepard from my locked room, hands shaking with rage. He broke into my room, went through my things. I can't live like this anymore. Then let's end it. Shepard's voice was calm, decisive. I'll prepare the eviction notice. Can you handle 30 days? I'll handle whatever I need to. 3 days later, a sheriff's deputy arrived at the front door. I'd been expecting him. Gertrude and Marvin hadn't. The deputy was professional, efficient. Notice of termination of tenancy. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Gertrude's face went white. Marvin's went red. Owner's prerogative under Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 33-1375. The deputy continued. You must vacate by July 27th. He turned to me. Sir, do you understand this notice and confirm this is your decision? I understand. This is my decision. The deputy left. Then came the explosion. Dad, you can't do this. Gertrude's voice hit a pitch I'd never heard. We have nowhere to go. Tears. Drama. She actually dropped to her knees. I'll change. We'll change. Just give us another chance, please. My heart tugged. She was still my daughter. The little girl I'd raised, protected, loved. But I remembered the bruise above my eye, the Thanksgiving humiliation, the forgery attempt, the bedroom invasion. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. Marvin's face was pure fury. You'll regret this, old man. Maybe, but it's my regret to have. I went to my room, locked the door, sat on the bed, shaking but resolute. 30 days. I had to survive 30 days. That evening I called Shepard to report the service. The next 30 days will be rough, he warned. They'll provoke incidents. Try to create evidence that you're unfit, that you made this decision irrationally. What should I do? Document everything. Stay calm no matter what they do. And consider security cameras. In my own house? Common areas, yes, it's legal in Arizona. One-party consent state. You own the property, you can record. The next morning, I drove to an electronics store, bought 2 small security cameras, battery-powered, motion-activated, subtle enough not to be obvious, but capable enough to capture everything. Back home, I installed them carefully. One in the living room, one in the kitchen. They covered the common areas where confrontations happened. I kept them off bedrooms and bathrooms. Legal boundaries mattered. My room remained private. No recording needed there. Over the next days, Marvin escalated. I woke one morning to find the kitchen destroyed. Dishes smashed on the floor. Food scattered across counters. Cabinet doors hanging open. Gertrude appeared, eyes wide with false concern. "Dad, did you do this? During an episode?" But the camera had caught everything. Marvin at 2 in the morning, systematically destroying the kitchen with calculated fury. Another day I discovered my framed firefighter photos thrown to the floor, glass shattered. Decades of service, memories, honors, destroyed. Again the camera showed truth. Marvin deliberately pulling them from the wall, throwing them down one by one. Living room furniture overturned, a lamp broken. More chaos, more attempts to frame me as unstable. Each incident documented. Each piece of evidence downloaded, backed up, sent to Shepard. "Evidence attached," I wrote in my emails. His response, "Perfect. This demonstrates malicious intent. Keep recording." I sat at my laptop late one night, 20 days left until the deadline, watched the footage of Marvin destroying property, his face twisted with rage and calculation. They thought they were building a case for my incompetence. They were building a case for their own malice. I clicked Save on the video file, added it to the growing archive. 20 days left. I had the evidence, and evidence was power. Early August arrived with the weight of unfinished business. The 30 days had passed, and they hadn't left. Instead, they'd filed a counter lawsuit, accusing me of elder abuse. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so dangerous. Now we were headed to court, and everything I'd built over the past months would be tested. The legal notice had arrived 3 days after the eviction deadline. Their attorney, Daniel Cross, a cheap storefront lawyer with a reputation for taking any case and promising everything, had crafted a narrative of cruelty. I was the abusive father, the unstable elder, the vindictive landlord. They demanded $75,000 for emotional distress and housing costs. I'd felt sick reading it. After everything they'd done, they were painting me as the villain. Shepard had scoffed when he read their filing. Standard desperation tactic. Flip the narrative. Hope the judge doesn't look too closely. He'd set the document down. Let them. We have evidence. They have lies. The court hearing was scheduled for early September. I spent August in limbo, still living with them under one roof, the tension unbearable. But I also spent it preparing, organizing evidence, refining witness statements. Each day felt endless, but the court date approached with mathematical certainty. Late August, I sat in Shepard's office. His conference table was covered with physical evidence, printed photographs, bank statements, medical records, video stills. "Tell me again what we have," he said, testing my memory, making sure I could articulate it under pressure. I walked through it methodically. The guardianship documents I'd photographed from Marvin's office. The bank's documentation of the forgery attempt. Photos of staged messes with timestamps proving Gertrude had fabricated them. Security camera footage showing Marvin's deliberate vandalism. The medical record from my November ER visit. And witnesses? Frank Coleman, former fire captain. He'll testify to my competence. Shepard smiled. We have more than that. He pulled out a folder. Frank wrote a letter. So did 3 other firefighters who worked with you. He handed them to me. I read Frank's letter first. Detailed character reference describing my mental acuity, leadership, reliability over 35 years of service. The others were similar. Professional, powerful, credible. My eyes stung. I didn't ask them to do this. They did it because they believe in you. That matters in court. He showed me one more document. Rosalind submitted written testimony, too, about their manipulation tactics, what she witnessed. I looked at the stack of evidence, the web of support. We're ready. Are you? Cross will try to rattle you on the stand. I've faced worse than courtrooms. Early September, Pima County Courthouse. I arrived with Shepard, the building's formality pressing down like physical weight. High ceilings, wooden benches, the machinery of justice. I saw Gertrude and Marvin with Cross near the defendant's table. Cross wore a cheap suit, carried an aggressive posture. Gertrude wouldn't meet my eyes. Marvin glared. Rosalind sat in the gallery for support. So did Frank Coleman, wearing a press shirt, his former captain's bearing unmistakable. Judge Maria Santos entered, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. Court was called to order. Cross presented their case first. His strategy was transparent. Paint me as mentally declining, vindictive, abusive. He called Gertrude as his first witness. She took the stand, was sworn in. Cross guided her through prepared testimony. Ms. Gray, can you describe your father's mental state over the past year? He's been increasingly confused, paranoid. We tried to help, but he turned against us. And when he served you with eviction, how did that make you feel? Devastated, scared. We have nowhere to go. The tears came on cue. Has your father ever been violent? He's had outbursts, anger issues. The lies flowed smoothly. Then came Shepard's cross-examination, surgical, precise. Ms. Gray, you lived rent-free in your father's house for how long? 3 years, but we helped. Yes or no? 3 years? Yes. And during this time, how much did you contribute to mortgage, utilities, property taxes? Dollar amount, Gertrude faltered. We helped with other things. How much? Dollar amount? I don't have exact. 0. The answer is 0, correct? We provided care. Judge Santos intervened. Answer the question, Miss Gray. 0. Shepard introduced the bank statements, showed the unauthorized charges, $3,400 to online poker sites. Gertrude's face went pale. Then the medical record. ER visit, November 2024. Injury consistent with assault. Who injured your father that night? Long pause. The courtroom silent. There was an altercation. Who injured your father? Another pause. My husband pushed him. But Dad provoked. Thank you. No further questions. Shepard called me to the stand. I walked to the witness box, was sworn in, sat down. My hands were steady. Mr. Gray, tell the court about November 2024. I described it. The insurance check. Wanting to help them with their debt. Marvin's violence. Gertrude's response. Choosing her husband over her father. I kept my voice steady, presented facts rather than emotions. And Thanksgiving? What happened then? The public humiliation. Marvin's statement about teaching me a lesson. The guests' discomfort. Judge Santos took notes, her expression darkening. Shepard introduced the guardianship documents. Where did you find these? In Marvin's office. He was planning to have me declared incompetent so he could control my assets. Cross's cross-examination was aggressive but ineffective. Mr. Gray, isn't it true you're forgetful? That you need help managing your affairs? No. You expect this court to believe you handle all your finances independently? I do. I can provide 6 months of bank statements, showing every transaction reconciled to the penny. Cross tried another angle. You evicted your own daughter. What kind of father does that? I paused, then answered steadily. A father who refused to be abused in his own home. A quiet murmur of approval rippled through the gallery. Shepard introduced the security footage. Video clips played on the courtroom monitor. Marvin deliberately destroying property, throwing plates, breaking picture frames, overturning furniture, all time-stamped, all clearly intentional. Judge Santos's face tightened in disapproval. Cross objected. This video could be edited. Time-stamped, Your Honor. Metadata intact. Defense expert. Verified authenticity. Cross had no response. Frank Coleman was called. Brief testimony, but powerful. Decades of working together. My reliability. My mental sharpness. Would you trust Mr. Gray to manage a complex emergency? Shepard asked. Frank looked directly at the judge. With my life. I have. Many times? Judge Santos called a brief recess to review the evidence. 30 minutes felt like hours. I sat in the hallway with Shepard, unable to speak, barely able to breathe. She returned, called court to order, delivered her decision. I've reviewed all evidence presented. The pattern is clear. Mr. Gray has been subjected to financial exploitation and systematic harassment by the defendants. She went through her findings: the unauthorized bank access attempt, the staged evidence of incompetence, the documented threats and intimidation. The eviction is upheld in its entirety. The counterclaim is dismissed. Furthermore, I'm issuing a protective order. Ms. Gray and Mr. Marvin are prohibited from contacting Mr. Gray without his explicit written consent. She wasn't finished. I'm also referring this matter to Arizona Adult Protective Services for investigation of elder financial abuse. The gavel fell. Gertrude looked stunned, pale. Marvin started to rise, fury on his face. Cross pulled him back down. I released a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Outside the courthouse, Shepard shook my hand. You won. Completely. But I didn't feel triumphant. I lost my daughter. Rosalind appeared, took my arm gently. You protected yourself. There's a difference. She drove me home. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but also lighter somehow. The legal battle was over. They'd have to leave now. The house would be mine again. But the personal cost, my daughter, the relationship that once existed. You did what you had to do, Rosalind said softly. I know. Doesn't make it easier. She squeezed my hand. Something unspoken passed between us. More than friendship now. Something deeper that had grown through the months of crisis. Come to dinner tonight. You shouldn't be alone. I'd like that. We pulled up to Morning Brew. She led me inside to warm light and the smell of coffee. The nightmare was finally over. Late November brought Thanksgiving again. Exactly 1 year since I'd sat at a table with a bruise under my eye while my daughter explained to strangers why her husband had taught me a lesson. Today I was setting a different table, for different people. And I'd invited Gertrude. There was something she needed to see. The house felt different now. Empty of them since September, it had become mine again. Peaceful. Safe. Home. Rosalind worked beside me in the kitchen, our movements synchronized through months of growing closeness. We prepared turkey, stuffing all the traditional sides, a partnership that felt natural now. I was setting the table when she asked, Are you sure about inviting her? She needs to know. One way or another, this ends today. I showed her the invitation I'd sent. Simple card, handwritten. Come to Thanksgiving dinner. I have something to tell you. Gertrude had called yesterday, her voice uncertain. I'll come. Are you? Just come. 2:00. Rosalind adjusted my collar, her touch gentle. How do you feel? Like I'm about to close a book that's been open too long. The doorbell rang. Frank Coleman and his wife arrived first. Then Shepard and his wife. 2 other firefighter colleagues with their spouses. Janice Morales, the notary. Everyone who'd helped me reclaim my life. Warm greetings, gratitude, friendship. One place setting remained empty. Gertrude's. At 2:15 the doorbell rang again. I opened the door. Gertrude stood alone. No Marvin. She'd changed, thinner, worn, uncertain in ways I'd never seen before. Hi, Dad. First time she'd called me that with any softness in months. Come in. She entered, saw the gathering. Recognized Frank. Saw the others. Confusion crossed her face. I thought it would be just us. No, these are my family now. A flicker of pain in her expression. Introductions were made. Awkward. Formal. She sat in her designated seat. The atmosphere tense but controlled. The meal was served. Conversation flowed around the table. Gertrude remained quiet, picking at her food. I watched her watching me. Saw her notice when I laughed, something she hadn't heard in years. Saw her eyes widen when Rosalind touched my hand, an intimate gesture. She was realizing I'd moved on, found happiness without her. After the main course, before dessert, I stood, tapped my glass lightly. The room quieted. A year ago, I sat at a table not unlike this one. I kept my voice steady. I had a bruise under my eye. I'd just been told I deserved it. Frank and the others nodded. They knew the story. Gertrude looked down at her plate. I spent that day wondering how I'd become so powerless in my own life, how the people I'd loved had become strangers, who saw me as an obstacle to be removed. The words came easier than I'd expected. Factual, not bitter. But something changed that day. In my garage, looking at old photos, I remembered who I used to be. Someone who ran toward danger instead of away from it. Someone who protected others. I gestured to those present. These people helped me remember I wasn't alone. Frank, who testified to my character. Rosalind, who showed me I could trust again. Robert, who gave me the tools to fight back legally. I paused. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. I wanted my dignity back. I turned to Gertrude directly. And you need to know what that meant. I reached beneath the table, pulled out the black envelope I'd received from the notary all those months ago, placed it in front of her. Open it! Her hands shook as she pulled out the document, the copy of my will. She scanned it, her face changing as she read. House and 70% of my estate to the Tucson Firefighters Relief Fund. Her inheritance, $50,000, the legal minimum. Her face flushed red. Shock, then anger, then humiliation. Aware of the audience watching, she stood, voice rising. This is what you wanted to show me? That you've cut me out? I wanted you to understand the consequences of your choices. My choices? You're the one who threw your own daughter onto the street. I remained calm. I'd prepared for this. You lived in my house rent-free for 3 years. You stood by while your husband assaulted me. You tried to have me declared incompetent. You staged evidence to make me look confused. She tried to interrupt. I continued. I gave you everything. I wanted to help. You saw that generosity as weakness. Dad, I was desperate. Marvin had debts. His debts, not mine. Not your responsibility to solve with my money. Tears now. Genuine or performed, I couldn't tell anymore. After everything I've done for you, what did you do? Specifically, I kept my voice level. You lived here. I paid everything. You took. What did you give? Silence. You made a choice when you said I deserved to be hit. When you told strangers I needed to be taught a lesson. When you tried to steal my legal rights. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Can't you forgive me? I paused. Let the emotion break through for just a moment. Maybe someday, but not today. Not yet. So that's it? You've written me off? I've protected myself. There's a difference. She looked around the table. Saw no support. Only witnessing strangers. You wanted an audience for this? I wanted witnesses. So you couldn't twist the narrative later. She grabbed her purse. Stood abruptly. You're cruel. You're petty. You've become exactly what you accused me of being. She walked to the door, turned back. I hope you're happy with your new family, since you've thrown away your real one. The door slammed. Silence filled the room. Then Frank raised his glass. That took courage. I sat down, feeling hollowed out, but also complete, somehow. Someone had to say it. Are you all right? Rosalind asked softly. I will be. Frank's toast. To people who don't give up. Others joined. Glasses clinked. The conversation resumed, warmer now, lighter. Dessert was served. The atmosphere shifted toward genuine celebration. Later, after the guests left, Rosalind and I cleaned up together. She washed, I dried. Comfortable silence. Do you think she'll ever understand? She asked. I don't know, but I understand. That's enough. She kissed my cheek. You did the right thing. Did I? She's still my daughter. She made her choices. You made yours. Both can be true. I moved to the living room while she finished in the kitchen, picked up a photograph from the shelf. Gertrude as a child, maybe 7 years old, laughing at something just out of frame. Happy. Innocent. Before everything changed. I looked at it for a long moment, then set it down gently. Rosalind appeared in the doorway. Want to plan that California trip? I smiled. Thought you'd never ask. We sat on the couch together, talking about highways and coastlines and small towns to explore, planning a future. The past finally released. 3 months later, Gertrude and Marvin divorced. His gambling debts had destroyed what remained of their marriage. She sent me a letter apologizing. I read it, didn't respond. Not ready yet. Maybe someday. Rosalind and I drove the California coast that spring. We stopped at lighthouses and seafood shacks and viewpoints where the Pacific stretched endless. I felt free for the first time in years. Justice, I learned, wasn't revenge. It was simply refusing to be a victim anymore. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.